I have been really, really into my memoirs recently, and I've got 7 that I want to talk to you about. First on the list is It Takes Blood and Guts by Skin. This was a random pickup in Waterstones because it was in the clearance section. And then I listened to the audiobook, which is read by Skin. So Skin is the front woman of Skunk Anansie, which are a powerhouse of a rock band. They were very big in the noughties and 2010s and were all over like Kerrang, that kind of thing. But they stood out because Skin is black and there were not many black people in rock at that time, let alone fronting the bands and being the go-to face for them. I have always loved Skin, but I didn't know much about Skunk Anansie. I just thought she was hot. Basically, I was a teenager. I knew I liked Hedonism, the song, and I didn't really have much other exposure to Skunk Anansie at that time because when I was living in Belgium, I used to get all my music from the library and like rip the CDs at home, and they didn't have much variety, and they definitely didn't have any Skunk Anansie. So I didn't get into their music until much later in life, but it was really interesting to hear about the band's progression and growth and how Skin's life influenced their music and how the other members influenced the music, and then what she went on to do after the band. I think they did break up for a bit. I think they're broken up now. I'm not actually sure. I can't remember when this was published, but she's gone on to do so many really, really cool things because she's got this powerhouse of a growly, raspy voice, and I am a sucker for any kind of like background, how it was made information. So like that kind of stuff, spot on, loved it. I was so into this whole memoir. I really, really recommend the audiobook if you have access to it. Next we have Scorpions by Tuppence Middleton. This one I read this year. This is about Tuppence's OCD and emetophobia and how they sort of interact with each other. OCD being obsessive compulsive disorder and emetophobia being fear of vomiting. And or vomit? Not sure. She does explain it. I knew Tuppence from watching Sense8. She's an actress, but she always seemed like a really interesting person to me. And this is a really like concise novella told in 8 parts because her OCD revolves around the number 8. It's like flashes into her life rather than her life as a whole. But we talk about how she grew up, how she deals with like flights and acting and her kid and pregnancy and that sort of what she has to do in order to feel safe and calm and not anxious when she leaves the house because of her OCD and how crippling it is to her. So definitely trigger warnings if you're triggered by anything along those lines. But oh my God, it's such a good book. It's so informative and there's so many nuances to both elements of her diagnoses. Like the one that I was texting people about is like she talks about different, like there's different kinds of vomit. There's good vomit and there's bad vomit when it comes to emetophobia. So there are kinds of vomit that don't bother her at all. I think one of them was like if you're really hungover because you've gotten drunk and then you're sick, that doesn't bother her. Like yes, it's gross, but it doesn't trigger her OCD. It's like potentially viral contamination vomiting that will trigger her OCD because she has OCD about cleanliness and the viral and bacteria germ situation because of that. I think she does also touch on her time during COVID, if I am remembering correctly, because it came out this year. So it would have been written in that time period, I think. It's just so interesting. Even if you don't know who Tuppence is, it's just a really interesting snapshot into somebody's life living with these 2 conditions that I knew nothing about, and it's really informative and I really recommend it. Next we have In Order to Live by Yeonmi Park. This is about Yeonmi, who grew up in North Korea and her escape into I think China and then South Korea, because that's the route you have to take that is safest, apparently. This was horrific and horrible and terrifying. The state of North Korea is like mind-bogglingly awful, and the stuff that she was talking about and discussing as normal that were normal for her made me very angry, made me very, very frustrated. Just, it's a very difficult read, but I do recommend it. The audiobook is really good. Please do check the trigger warnings. None of this is happy. None of this memoir is happy, but it taught me about a part of the world that I don't know much about, and that's why I read memoirs, because I like the in-person, like the direct narrative of someone who is telling that story. I found it incredibly informative, incredibly sad, upsetting, thought-provoking, frustrating, so angry, and just, yeah, there's a lot of things that she lived through and had to do in order to survive that were horrific. I believe there is also a second book in this memoir now that she is out of North Korea and having to like assimilate into regular life that is not what she was used to growing up. I've not read that one. I'm not sure I have the brain power / space to read that one. But In Order to Live was good. Formative's not the right word. It was something I needed to read, and I'm glad I've read it. I don't feel the need to reread it, but I'm so glad I read it. Yeah. None of these, if you hadn't gathered already, none of these memoirs are particularly happy. I think It Takes Blood and Guts is like the happiest of the bunch. Sorry. Next one is The Woman in Me by Britney Spears. Britney's an icon. I grew up of the age where she was always in the tabloids and the magazines and paparazzis. So she's always been a huge figure in pop culture for me personally. I always wanted to know what was going on behind the scenes, because the shit that she was going through in very public places seemed like a lot. And you get to know exactly what she was going through. This goes into all the details of her conservatorship. It is written the way that she talks. So if you've never heard her talk, I recommend maybe looking that up, because I'm sure a lot of people find it quite irritating. She has worked with a ghostwriter in this, which does help a bit, but it is written in the sort of slightly chaotic way that she talks. I feel for her so much. The shit that her dad put her through, the shit that men in her life in general put her through, made her think she was crazy, got her hooked on drugs and alcohol, and sent her to rehab when she didn't need rehab, and took her children away from her. Like, the shit that she has gone through because of a conservatorship, because her dad legally took all the rights away from her own life. It's horrible. It made me want to scream at points, and it just makes me so happy to see her living her life the way that she wants to now, because she can, because she has that freedom, because she got out of the conservatorship. And it baffles me that people can be put under these conservatorships with as little evidence or checkups or like any due diligence, maybe is the word I'm looking for, because the amount of power you are taking away from someone on the basis of maybe a couple of people's like decisions and say-sos is concerning to me, and that's quite scary, and I don't like it. We love Britney, we stand Britney. This was hard to read, and I will never think of Justin Timberlake the same way again. Next, we have Strong Female Character by Fern Brady. This is another one from this year. Fern Brady is a comedian in the UK who is autistic and late diagnosed autistic. And this is her memoir of her life, being autistic, working out she's autistic, and that journey for her. And it's kind of fucking harrowing. I wasn't expecting it to be as dark or as fucked up as it was. This girl has lived a fucking life. I don't want to spoil any of it, but it's something. And she's just so frank and down to earth. And she's something. And I have a huge amount of respect for her. This one hit home as well because I am also late diagnosed autistic. And I resonated a lot with a lot of what she was saying, and then absolutely not with others, even though I feel like in some aspects we have similar brands of, like, similar flavours of autism. There were a lot of scenes that I read and went, oh, fucking hell. Like, I would struggle to believe that had actually happened if I hadn't heard you speak and completely doubted your ability to tell a lie ever. So, yeah, huge respect for her. This was so interesting to read. I'm glad she wrote it. I'm glad it's out there. It really made me feel seen in some places, and I felt a weird sense of community with her simply because we're both female and autistic. I've really enjoyed it. If you are either of those things, I recommend it to you. I don't feel like I can have this list without mentioning I'm Glad My Mum Died by Jeanette McCurdy. I know this came out a while ago, and I read it a while ago. I think I read it shortly after it first came out. This is about Jeanette McCurdy, who is most famous for acting in iCarly, and I think then the Sam and Cat show. I used to watch a little bit of iCarly when it was on, but it was rarely on in English when I was in Belgium, so I didn't watch it all that much. And I never watched the Sam and Cat show, but I know who she is because she was always my favourite character in iCarly when I watched it, because I like the brash, sarcastic ones, basically. This is about Jeanette's childhood and her horrifying abuse by her mother in ways that a lot of people would not think to see abuse, if that makes sense. It is quite sinister. It is quite emotionally draining to read. Her mum fucked her up, gave her an eating disorder, like she did a shitty job of fucking raising her, basically. Abused her money, and used her as like a ticket to get rich quick, sort of. And then Jeanette had all of that pressure on her from such a young age. And it's just heart-wrenching. It's really sad. And I think everyone should read it. And I think it shows a perspective on child actors that needs to be shouted from the rooftops at this point in time. Like, the fact that we are still having situations like Honey Boo Boo, where her mum frittered away all the money that she made as a kid, and she's now an adult and she has none of the proceeds from the work and the labour that she put in as a kid, or any compensation for the trials that she has gone through because of her like rise to fame. Like that's all gone. There is no protection in place, or very, very little. Like even with the Coogan account, which is the bank account parents have to put some of the earnings aside for the child when they are grown up, I think you only get like 10%. I know Alison Stoner is currently doing a lot of work around this and a lot of like, trying to spread awareness. Her and Demi Lovato are trying to do those. I want to see, so I think Demi's done a documentary, which I want to see. And I think Alison's either written a book or has started doing a course, and she's like done the training to be some sort of mental health practitioner in that field. It's a big it's a special interest of mine and will continue to be for a long time. So I really, really enjoyed is the wrong word reading this memoir, but it really hit home. And Jeanette, she writes it chronologically. And to start with, the writing is as simple as it might be for someone of the age that she's writing about would write it, if that makes sense. And then as she progresses through the book, her writing gets more mature. And that, combined with her reading the audiobook, is just like a cocktail that will kick you in the teeth. Like, it's horrible, and it works so well. Last on this list is Hijab Butch Blues by Lamia H. I have just finished reading this one. I picked up a copy at Gay as the Word in London. This is the memoir of Lamia, who grew up in a Middle Eastern country that is not specified and then moved to the US, and throughout all this works out that she is probably a lesbian. So we hear a lot about her experiences living in the US, the terrifying like immigration laws and hoops she has to jump through, the sort of the xenophobia and classism she experiences in her home country, or the country that she grows up in, while also working out that she's a lesbian and trying to justify this through her religion and her knowledge of the Quran. And I learned a lot about the Quran in this. There's a lot of quotes and like stories taken from the Quran that are the paraphrased, and I was surprised to see how similar a lot of the stories in the Quran are to the ones that I know from the Bible. I am not Christian or religious in any way, but I did attend Quaker meetings as a child, and then I ran some for I ran the equivalent of Sunday school for my local Quaker meeting in Belgium for a couple of years. So we read some religious stories, even though Quakerism is not inherently religious or associated with the Bible. That's a whole other video. The stories I knew from that, very similar to those in the Quran. Sometimes it felt like they had just changed the names, and it made me get frustrated because all of these stories and morals and like lessons that you are interpreting and teaching from these holy books in different religions, you are all telling the same stories, the same lessons, you are saying the same things in different ways. Why are we not getting along better? Maybe that's a really autistic way of thinking about it, but like, why? It's all the same. Why are we not getting along? Yes, this was really eye-opening. I knew nothing. I knew very little about Islam, and even less about someone in Islam working out that they are gay and what that looks like for them, especially when growing up in a Middle Eastern country and having very traditional practices and still holding true to their religion. What I've really enjoyed is that I don't think there is a point where Lamia doubts her religion because of how she's feeling. She uses her religion to explain it, which I thought was a refreshing take, because all I've been subjected to are the stereotypes that you see on TV and things like that. So I really liked it. I would love to read something like other books that are similar, in a similar vein, because like I said before, I like reading memoirs to learn about bits of the world that I don't know much about. And this was a good like opener, I think, for this, like for learning about Islam and other people's experiences growing up gay. That's it. That's my list. I highly, highly recommend all of these books. I strongly recommend you look up trigger warnings for all of them if you like the sound of any of them, because they are all a little bit hard-hitting, and I would not recommend you read them if you are low on spoons in any capacity. Thank you so much for watching and being here. Let me know if you have any requests for themes for recommendations videos. I've still got like 6 or 7 in the tank, but if you have any requests, I'm happy to put together a little list. Yeah, leave me a microphone emoji if you made it this far into the video. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.